what you found most being, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can. Mhm.
Yes. So I was just saying that we heard you share what you found most useful, being the car, your gut, and your feelings. And I was just wondering, what do you appreciate most about today's conversation compared to other conversations you might have had in the past?
Coaching conversations or normal conversations?
When you compare this is a coaching conversation, so what do you
Mm,
appreciate most about this being a coaching conversation as
mm.
compared to other conversations you've had in the past?
Okay. Um, but the fact that I didn't need to go into specific situations, but I was talking about also the way. So because I started with my work life, which was mainly what I was thinking about, but this really applies to the way I live my life. So it was a conversation that can apply to many situations, work-wise, private life. So that's what I appreciate the most.
So
That
what I'm
can serve
hearing you
in
say,
many situations. Yeah.
okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that as a result of this conversation, you saw that you saw the value in applying it to other areas of your life, not just about the area you brought, which was your work life.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I would just like you to share with us what has shifted for you in this conversation, this coaching conversation.
I really think that the example of the metaphor of the car really helped me to visualize, because I always say, I want to be on the driving seat. And when, Ben told me, yeah, it's okay, but, you don't need to rush or, break speed limits and so on. And this reminded me indeed that when I picture myself at the driving seat, also by telling this, I was never having in my mind the conditions around me. I was probably thinking about, hypothetical, or maybe not really thinking much around just saying, okay, I'll give it a change, I'll change it, I'll change the situation, but maybe maybe this is the thing, paying much more attention towards the landscape and the streets and other cars or people crossing rather than on me driving. That's another insight.
Great, great. So the coaching conversation made it possible, especially through the use of that metaphor of the car,
Mm.
to really sort of slow you down and help you to appreciate the other things, appreciate and notice the other things that are going on around you. And as you said yourself, to enjoy it.
Mm.
Awesome. Awesome. So share with us, Emanuela, what would you like to say to your coach?
But first of all, thank you for for taking the time after such a long day and to manage to follow my confusion. um, but also to see in me, I always felt this divided, but probably this helped me to see also in me, this part which is very important, that helps me to continue growing and learning and go beyond my comfort zone, but in a nice way, in a way that makes me feel good and not in a way that puts me in danger. So yeah, and the thing probably I need to do, or I need to keep doing, or maybe further do, is to enjoy it, to play around that, and to just accept, recognize this is probably one of the more, because in life you cannot always be, again, sometimes you are driving in the city, sometimes you're driving in the highway, and depending on where you are, you need to adjust your speed. Even though you have a Ferrari, you still need to respect. I'm not a Ferrari, but you need to, try to. You need to consider where you are. So maybe at this point in time, I'm I'd better enjoy where I am. Again, because I'm
Can't
very,
let
I'm
the
very.
tears run when your heart is feeling heavy and you've come undone. Remind yourself that you are loved. One day you will look back and see how much you've grown, how far you have traveled through each and every storm. This is only a season. It won't rain forever. It's only a moment in time.
One more song you will share with me afterward.
Ben, I think you're on mute.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I said this is a very good song to encourage our clients that it's just only a season and appreciate and enjoy every season so that you will not live a life of regret, missing that moment that was just there waiting for you. Yeah? Thank you, Emmanuel. Great.
Thank you.
Susan, do you think we can move to the Mentimeters now and take a look? Because a lot of our friends has contributed a lot of wonderful insight on what stood out for them. So I'm going to share the screen. Will you be able to read it out for us?
Yes, 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 I'll
Thank
be
you. Thank
sure.
you so very much. And here we go.
I think you have to. Okay. So, what stood out in today's coaching session? A lot of good stuff. Amazing coaching presence. Very deeper and insightful coaching session for far different from our practice sessions. 2 words succinctly picked by the coach: when and enough. How the coach asks the question on when to invoke awareness in the client. Visualization as inspired artist helped client to visualize that she should go with the flow. The coach was an empathetic listener. How the coach slowed down the pace in the beginning by a moment of silence and centering. I appreciated the coach being so skillful at observing the client's thinking and reflecting it back, leading to the client having beautiful realizations,
Wow.
reflecting back about the truth during the awareness conversations,
Wow.
and using truth again during the choice conversation.
Yeah.
Conversation beautifully centered around the who of the client.
Mm.
How the coach was observant of the coachee's body language and was able to use it to introduce reflection at various intervals.
Yeah.
How the paced conversation lightened the load off the coachee's shoulders. The obvious relief by the client on realizing she does not have to drop one thing
Yeah.
to start another, but enjoy where she is now. The coach helped the client realize that it wasn't about the time. A
Mm.
lot of penny dropping moments for the client. Amazing way of showing the client an inner self.
Wow.
The coach danced with the client's thought and feeling. The coach challenged the client with almost switching roles with the client. What if art is making decisions in order to avoid discomfort?
Mm.
That is, perhaps, is it Artie doesn't want to change their career because she's protecting herself from discomfort, lots of effort, potential failure of the unknown, rather than staying in sales. I like the invitation to the pauses and reflection, and how when the client was about to go into more details, Ben invited her to stay on a particular idea. The distinction between adventure and risk and the metaphor of the car, the metaphor the client could build upon, how the coach paused regularly, holding space for the client to reflect on her new learning and look inside in order to connect to herself. Simply super in expanding the mind. I found this one difficult. The client seemed quite vague and generic. Ability to pause and reflect by master coach. The coach creating the presence by what the client expressed as her desire in the beginning of the conversation, leading to her connecting deeper within herself.
Great, thank you, Susan. Let's all of us turn on the camera and let's give everyone a round of applause for such a wonderful learning session. Shall we do that? Okay, ready? Let's turn on the camera and woo! Great, great, great. Thank you. Well, it's such an honor to be able to, work together with our clients today. And so now we're going to turn that into learning sessions. While we're doing that, maybe Joe or maybe Martina or some of our faculty members, would you like to give some kind of like remarks in terms of what today's conversation shows us? While I get the Mentimeters ready for the next segment, where we can get people, get our participants to share what is it that they can spot regarding the transformative principles. Okay, would that be okay? Great. So, faculty members, would you like to be able to just stand in for a couple moments for me as you share what are some of the things that we can take away? Oh, any faculty members here with me? So sorry. Oh, that's okay. Good. It's okay. No problem. Good. So remember back in the in our transformational approach, we talk about awareness, clarity, and choice conversations. Remember this? Now remember the 5 checkpoints: expanding the mind, determine the focus, uncovering the understanding, and then an invitation for discovery. Do you remember that? So everybody familiar with that? So those are not stages, right? It's not like step 1, step 2, step 3, and we try to do that. No, this kind of like 4 checkpoints kind of like rotate within the conversation itself, with each of these checkpoints serving a specific function. Right now, so what I'm appreciating here is that there are moments in the conversation where you can apparently see that there are insights arising for the client. Now, if you can all turn on the camera, that would be very good. Can you give a sign to show, a sign, lift up your hand to say that you can notice that, right? Insight. Great. So that's what I think we as professional coach need to tune into, is to look for those shifts that is happening. And today the shift seems to have a different variations, right? So one is like a new understanding, and then there's some moment that is like an insight, and then another one is like a realization. Can you see the different wave of penny dropping down for the client? If you can just raise up your hands. Oh, some of you still cannot. This is a learning session, means you're going to take away free learning pointers. So it would be good if you can all participate, have your camera on, then we can kind of like interact upon. Good. So are we able to recognize a different variation of it? Like wisdom, not wisdom, understanding, realizations, insight. Are you able to identify them? or at least see the difference in today's conversations? Right. And I think one of the things I'm appreciating is that, it might not be so useful to constantly force the client towards an application or what can you do right now, right? Because the doing only makes sense when the learning and the understanding are clear. And what makes a coaching conversation a quality, meaningful conversation is the ability for the coach to support the clients to first gain an understanding, and then at the advanced level or as you begin to progress further, it's not to take the learning as, okay, I got the learning, now what can you do about it? Right? It's to pause it there and say, hey, it looks like these are fresh learning, which is good. Let's just take a few moments to just reflect upon the learning in reference to maybe the situation that you're in, or just simply let's talk about a little bit more regarding this learning. So for those who are at the second level, how many students are at the second level now? One, two, okay, three, great. Okay, for those who are still at the core level, don't worry. We take, mastery, and then we complete one level of learning and then we move on to the next level. And that's where we talk about double loops thinking capacity, in which they look at their first answer, the first layer of the answer, which is basically, okay, this is my new understanding, which the coach pick it up, put it onto the table, and then the coach then asks the client to look at that content, which is basically a new understanding, and ask the clients to think a little bit more around that. So when we do that, then you are actually creating a double loop learning process that gives this conversation a little bit more capacity, more Are you able to notice that? Great. So now I'm going to put that onto your table right now for all our audience. We're going to go to the Mentimeters one more time. Okay. So this time round, I would love to hear from you. Okay. Can you identify some of the principles? Okay. That has been demonstrated. So I have already identified one, and that is the invitation for discovery. Okay, so let's see what else can you spot regarding today's case study about the principles that we taught in the class. Can we just take a few moments to do that? Okay, good. So share with us, what can you spot here? Okay, so in this way, we are not saying there's a right answer or the wrong answer. It's basically for you to use your understanding that have been taught to you and see whether you can spot it. So this allowed you to be very clear about what you have learned, right? Good. So we have a case study. Use that and see what you can spot that will support you to be a little bit more clear in terms of the principles. Now, again, the power of the power of the coaching lies in the application of an understanding. It's not an application of what you've been told to memorize, right? So if you have no understanding, then your coaching conversation was just purely an execution of what you remember. I think I got these questions that I heard and then just execute. Why do you ask that question? I don't know, but I just felt that I want to ask that question. Right? So in that case, then your conversation is kind of like more of not so much of an intentional approach, but more on as it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. So that's why it fall off a little bit from the this intentionality. Yeah? Great. So are we all ready to share? It seems that there's no contribution on the Mentimeters. Okay, anyone? Okay. Oh, I think maybe you guys are still trying to contribute.
Ben, do you think that there is a correct link in the Mentimeter? Because I contributed, sorry,
Oh,
but maybe it doesn't pop up.
okay. Let me just try again one more time. Hmm. I'm not sure. It sounds I'm looking at the right page. Let me just do one more thing. Let me just copy the link again, and then
Yeah,
I'm
I
going to
contributed
present it.
too.
And then I'm going to put that onto the chat box one more time. it's not showing up on the screen. That is something that so let's not be bothered with the technical part. Let's just turn it into a interaction. So Milena, would you like to go first since you have already contributed?
I will do my best. I have some guests, as you can see. So what I shared was when I noticed that the coach invited the client to reflect upon her own learning. There was a moment when the coach asked, did you repeat? Did you hear what you just have said? And
Yeah,
what have you just discovered in this moment? So it
yeah,
is not, like you mentioned, about the learning only. It's about what are you learning from your learning? How do you
yeah.
reflect upon your learning?
Precisely. Whoa. Okay, so this is how we learned. Now we spotted the principles and then we look at how the coach demonstrate that. And then we say, oh, okay, what are you learning about the learning? And so next time you can do that in your conversation. If you notice that the clients have some learning, but the learning is not fully processed yet, then you can say, hey, let's just pause there and let's talk about, yeah, can you share with me what do you learn from this piece of learning? Got it? Great. So this is how we can turn this into something valuable and practical for you. So I can see a few friends has already contributed, and one of them is the bulleting, the framing. Would someone like to talk about that in terms of what do you notice about the way um, the bulleting and the framing has been carried out? Okay, Sarah, go for it, Sarah.
Um, it was for me like a connection of ideas, as if
Okay.
what the client was offering, a lot of things that has
Yeah.
to be drawn with a thread, and the coach
Yeah.
was just drawing the connections between the ideas to make them very
Wow.
clear and realized. This is the realization, I guess.
Wow. High five. Come on, let's give Sarah a high five. So there's so much, it's like the bullet is so useful, isn't it? It can be joined together to form a big picture, or it can serve as just simply an outline so that it becomes more clear, right? And it all can be used to connect to make it more full in terms of the what the client is referring to. Yeah? Great, good, well done. How about then there's another one that is contributed. The coach directed the mind towards what is possible and positive. Love to hear how is that being executed or demonstrated in today. The person who shared that, would you like to, come on the screen and share? Oh, Susan, go for it.
Yes, I noticed how, I think maybe I should even rephrase that, as in the coach did not allow the mind to go towards what was negative and impossible, because the coach consistently contained
Yeah.
the mind of the client. Even when the client wanted to go off, the coach kept bringing the client back. So I think it's more of not allowing.
It's like the mother hens or the mother the mother the dog. I mean the little puppy that's always running away. Like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like bring it back again. Oh, come back here. It's safer here in the nest. It's kind of like constantly cuddling back. The
Yes.
little one that's trying to run away. Okay, and so now we learned, that we do not necessarily have to be always what would you like to have happened, okay, or what positive difference would that bring to you by looking at the content, recognizing, the bullet. I mean, be able to bullet it and then extract out the value, or the heartbeat of the story. That means what keeps the story alive, as in the positive ones. So the coach, I remember, I cannot remember how much I can remember, but I just remember a couple of them. It's like you have this, this aliveness, that, being alive, is a very something that is important and is something that you honor, right? So that is something that we can bring it back to the clients and say, okay, it's all about you being alive. You got this important value of making things beautiful. All right. Then the clients kind of like slip away and say, yeah, yeah, yeah. I just want to make it beautiful, but it's not always enough. I just want to make even more. Okay, okay, okay. The puppy just went out again. Okay, okay, let's bring it back one more time. Okay. So by constantly containing within what is possible or what is within the client's, okay, another dimension here is what is within the client's control. Okay, good. So think about that. When you are able to perceive that you are in a control situation, certainly the mind will be a little bit a little bit more broader compared to when your mind wanders off to think about things that is not within the control. So far, so good. So the framing, of what we are hearing from the story can serve as a way to reinforce to the client's perceptions on what is within the client's control. So far, so good. Great. But then there are times when you realize, children as being children, they just want to run out to to play. So whatever you try to contain doesn't seem to work. The coach has to say, okay, okay, just stop there. We're not going that direction to talk. Let's just come back and talk about what we're supposed to talk. Okay. But exercise with discretion. Okay. But it's certainly not saying that you cannot do that. But I think we can do that in a more constructive way and a more polite way. The point is, if you don't do that, what's the risk? Or what might be the price that you'll be paying? Am I getting your attention here? Right? Okay. So the art is more of how you can bring the clients back in a very respectful way without letting the clients feel that they're being interrupted. Cool? Okay, great. No, there's one part whereby the coach just simply asks the client, shut up. Okay, so that part can be a little bit more artistic, done it a little bit more artfully by saying, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I just noticed that your mind seems to wander off to think about what is not possible. And I'm just wondering, what do you notice about that when your mind goes into that direction? What do you notice about the way you're thinking right now versus when you're able to look at what you can do about it? And so I think that will be more artful, but it's like okay, I'm just running out of time. Okay, good. We have another one, evoking awareness through the metaphor. Who offers that? Evoking awareness. Oh, great. Angela, would you like to offer? As in, what do you notice in today? How is that being demonstrated so that everybody can learn from your observation?
Sure, thank you. Well, we had a client who was like I would say a highly reflective thinker. And so there were several metaphors presented, but the driving metaphor was the one that resonated the most. And that was able to produce, like additional insights, which was, I thought that was really good because she was very reflective. So she was thinking about it and reflecting on it. And so that was good. But also the coach guided the client in visualizing it. And I noted that in my notes. So that was really good to slow the thinking down and really help the client get into the metaphor. And so it's very good.
Well done, well done. And I think what we can notice here today that while the client is capable of reflecting, but each time when the clients think a little bit faster, that's where the reflective thinking space becomes a little bit kind of like polluted with logical thinking. And I think that's where it kind of like bring the clients back instead of supporting the clients to be more generative. Right? Do you all notice that? The speed of the expression. Yeah. And so that's why in one moment in time, the coach just said, okay, you're not answering me. Just okay, just pause there. Just pause there and just take a few moments and then just allow whatever thought that you have to settle down. All right. So I think there's a difference here, and that is recognizing the speed of the client's thinking, and at appropriate time, invite the clients to slow down the thinking. Okay? So that allows the clients to, at least in today's conversation, to use a little bit more of the reflective thinking rather than the logical thinking. Got it? Good, great. So can you all see how things are coming together when we talk about, how thinking influence the learning? Remember back in the core training, thinking impacts influence learning, right? So when the client is thinking relatively fast, the learning that is produced by the clients through that way of thinking is more on logical understanding around kind of like tangible evaluation, right, wrong, yes, no, no, concrete. Okay, so very tactical on how to address the situation. But that is not appropriate at this moment of the conversation to think about what is it that we need to address, because fundamentally we have not even solidified what's the learning here. Do you see the difference there? When the client's thinking is fast, it's logical thinking, and that logical thinking stimulates the client's learning towards what needs to address, which is basically good, but then it's not useful if the learning has not been fully solidified. Got it? Great. So that when we are able to slow down the client's thinking and invite the client to pause, then the client is able to now use a different thinking to generate a different form of learning, whereby right now it's more on, okay, what's my insight here? What is opening up? What's my discovery? What's my new understanding? So that kind of learning will therefore then be more useful here, because then we can now move that into the next framework, which is basically, okay, now that you have processed your learning, what can we now use this learning to support you to think differently? Can you see how now the conversation is much more layered and quality? Got it? Great. Good. Hey, Susan, I see that your hand is raised.
Yes, Ben, I just want to ask, I'm a bit curious about the process. I noticed how you were using, I felt, I noticed that you used the word pause a lot. And I'm wondering how intentional that was, given the fact that you recognized the speed of the client's
Yeah.
thinking and speaking, because it was both, it was both an instruction and an experience at the same time.
Yeah.
So I felt that I kind of felt that was a subliminal message
Yeah.
to the client.
Use a layman term. Use a layman term.
And I just felt the
Substitute that
repetition of
with
the
more
word.
common language.
So I felt the repetition of the word and the action of the word
Uh-huh.
were just supporting the client to internalize the whole concept of pausing.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see whether do we have any faculty members here with me. Maybe they would like to respond to that. We have Martina here. Any insight, or Francis and Eva or Claire? Would you like to make some contribution here? It's good to have some different voices. No? Okay, today is quite quiet because it's quite late for everybody. I don't mind to do the talking. Well, I think at this point in time, let's just go back to some of the things we learned in the class, right? Okay. So I think we did not really cover that in the core level, but we certainly introduced that concept of or we have not even do that because we take that away. Actually, we used to taught this concept of the pause to connect. Okay, and we also talk about system 1 thinking and system 2 thinking. Okay, we talk about focus attention and diffuse attention, right? So now, being the expert in the process, we understand the how the role of thinking impacts the learning. So if you are not thinking in a constructive way, then the learning that generate from that kind of thinking is not going to be very useful to support the client to create the change, because they're going to use that learning to make the change. And whether the change is sustainable depends on how rich the learning is. So far, so good. Now, and that's where if the thinking is not, modified, then it impacts everything, right? So initially, we can, at least in this conversation, I'm able to recognize the learning style. The clients need to talk first in order to process her thought, right? So if you introduce a pause too early, then it might not have that impact, right? So I was just looking for, okay, let's see how the clients process her learning if a learning do happen, and see how well the clients actually manage it. Well, it seems that the clients can notice it, but then kind of like need a little bit time to process that. That happens right at the beginning. So when we invite the clients to talk about that, the clients is able to notice it and talk a little bit more. But then what I noticed becomes a pattern is that each time the learning, each time when the client is invited to process the learning, the logical thinking appeared at that moment. But the logical thinking doesn't seem to come at the first time when the new learning appeared. It only happens when the client is invited to process the learning. And since it becomes 2 times in a row, so that's where I think there's nothing much you can do, except that you need to physically come in to restrain it. Okay, so that the mind now kind of like, oh, okay, kind of like, okay, now look, because it's not that the client's intentionally doing that. Okay, it's just how the mind is responding. So when we are able to kind of like, when I kind of come in to kind of restrain it and say, hey, let's pause there and just get a sense of whether is that the God or is that the mind speaking, right? And the first time it doesn't work, the client's kind of like, okay, then come back again and then, okay, then I say, okay, that's not a constructive way of processing the learning. It's not saying that the content is not useful, but we're saying that, hey, that's not the constructive way to process the learning. So should we just try again? Okay, so I think that's what happens in this part. So it goes back to us managing the process of an invitation to discovery. And what the case here is teaching us today is that learning does not happen naturally for our clients. Sometimes they do, but sometimes it just need a little bit more of a directive guidance to allow the coach to facilitate the process for the client. So we are facilitating the process for the clients to have much more richer reflections and not interrupting the thought process of the clients during the discovery or self-disclosure. Are we able to see the difference between the two? Right? Because ICF is pretty quite clear that we do not interrupt the client, or the coach do not come in to kind of teach the clients what to do, or how to respond in regards to the way of thinking, right? But here we're facilitating the process to enable clients to be able to formulate their learning. Remember all your markers? Some of you just throw that away after you completed your training. But this is the markers that we're talking about. Okay. Good. Now the new batch of students are doing the competency lab again. So sometime in the month of August, for those who are in advanced training or completed advanced training, this is a good time to do refresher. Now, refreshing back something you learn helps to deepen your understanding, because we are not learning knowledge. We are learning a application which requires constant interaction of the understanding, right? So now that you can see the case, then you can begin to appreciate, wow, ICF markers actually have 2 markers that talks about invitation for learning. One is to help the client to formulate the learning, okay, this is my understanding. The other one is applying the learning towards action steps. Are they the same? They are not the same. One is applying and another one is to solidify the learning. Got it? Great. Good. Are we having good time today in terms of the learning? Great. Are we full or not enough? Good. We have a few faculty, which is a light time to say a few words before we end the sessions. Would that be okay? Great. Claire and Martina and Francis, would you like to offer some concluding statement before we say goodbye to everybody?
Hi, Ben. Hi, everybody. I hope my Wi-Fi is stable. It was just a beautiful case study, really, to really learn how important it is that we observe the learning style of our clients in order really to make them reflect, make them guide them to different insights and really connect them to themselves. I think that is it was a wonderful demonstration, especially on those two markers, the ICF, to solidify and really to apply the learning. That was very obvious in this case study. Thank you so much also to the client.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So like some of the question syntax would be like, okay, how would that change the way you look at the situations, right? So that is applying it. Then when we ask the clients, hey, you just mentioned something, let's take a look. What's the learning here? What do you gain out from that statement that you just said? So that is helping the client to solidify. Then here today, we have a little bit of exceptional, and that is, okay, clients, I'll be the client, you'll be the coach. You do your own job of reflecting back what you just said, to me, so that I can hear. Right? So this is a fun way in which you can introduce into your technique, okay, of helping clients to have fun in solidifying their learning. Can do? Well, if you are doing an in-person one, you can introduce a lot of other forms like, okay, this is a piece of paper. Let's draw on it. What are some big ideas that pop up for you? Okay, good. You know what I mean? And then from there, you play with the clients in terms of what's the learning. So far, so good. Okay. But fundamentally, principles, yes, invite the clients, not just having a learning, but help them to solidify the learning. Good, thank you. Francis and Claire, any thoughts for our audience?
Sure, I'll go ahead very quickly. First of all, thank you so much for this evening of learning, is evening here in Switzerland. And as I reflected on the conversation, all of the above is so, it's so there. We've studied it in the course of our various levels. It's all there. But I would say this one thing that really stood out for me. The versatility in the way you bullet. Okay, this is not a celebration of you, Ben, but what it says is how we build the versatility to reflect using the bulleting concept, right, in order to help the client really see him or herself.
Yeah.
And the second thing that really stood out for me is the use of cumulative listening.
Yes.
To bring from what was earlier in the conversation forward, and then to use it to frame the next inquiry was really how is this all landing for you? And I really appreciated, it was very clearly demonstrated and reinforced that for me why it's so important to have that competency, that capability to do so.
Wow, thank you. And it requires a lot of good short-term memory to remember what was said earlier on without taking notes.
Absolutely.
Okay, so those are the gym exercise that we need to work on. Okay, but so, well, take heart. Good. Claire, will you have the honor before, then we'll have Susan to close our session tonight. Claire, would you like to share a couple of thoughts?
Yes, thank you so much. And bear with me in case there's background noise. It's a little bit late in the evening, so everything is happening. But I really appreciated today's session. Incidentally, this morning I had an experience with a client who was also very deeply reflective and also was getting, a lot of logical, thinking coming in place.
Yeah.
And I must suggest that it was quite challenging for me because I
Yeah.
really didn't understand the way forward or how I can really support the
Mhm.
client. But what you brought in today, one, pacing the client, first of all, you let the client be themselves so that
Mm.
you're able to recognize this client is this way and this way. So with that in mind, this being the characteristic of the client, you then support the client even in your way of talking. You're literally pacing the client.
Mm.
And also you direct a bit of the
Mm.
client that I'm
Mm.
pacing you. In case the
Yeah.
client doesn't get it, you might need to say, okay, let's take a minute over there and let's process this. But even your dialogue has to also pace that. And I noticed that was
Yeah.
happening for you. You slowed down in the way you spoke
Mm.
with the client. And then another thing is, with that pacing, you will notice that the client will, when the switch happens for the logical, you actually see it.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yes.
this,
Yes.
yeah. And then you're able to say, okay, you're able to use something like, wow, okay, and you pose the client. So that really keeps quietening that logical voice because it really
Yeah.
interferes with the reflective.
Precisely.
Yes. Then the other thing I also learned today is when you offer a metaphor and maybe because of the logical aspects, the client is
Yes.
not catching it.
Yes.
You might need to gradually direct with the metaphor. Okay, so you're driving now. Can you see yourself driving?
Okay.
So we are going to that until the client grasps it,
Yes.
so that then they are able to run with it. So you have
Wow.
to almost subject it to them. Yeah, because of that
Precisely.
interference. That's a huge,
Wow.
huge learning for me. Yeah. Thank
Let's
you
give
very much
everybody
for
high
that.
five. Whoa! Can you see how the thinking is such a challenge here, and yeah, created it's not that the client's content. I mean, of course, the client's content is important, but it's the way the thinking process is working, and so once we're able to recognize, hey, the client is not catching up with the metaphor, especially with the paintings and the color, the client literally take it off the tangent to another point. I was like, okay, that's okay, great. It's kind of like go off, right? Well, we can't, as we say in the class, it's like fishing, right? You get everything right, but you just can't get the fish to bite the bait unless you're fishing in a fish tank, in a small one. The fish are not eaten for weeks. Of course, it will bite the bait immediately, right? So we did all that we can as the students, in learning. We understand, okay, this is how thinking works. This is how I can notice it. Okay, this is how I can adjust it. Now that you know that the client is not catching it up, then we learn how to manage it when it doesn't land. Great. Move on. I move on and see how it will land in the next opportunity arising in the conversation. See what I mean? Great. So at least this is what we can now if we got such a live case study like this in classroom when we talk about okay, learning, influence, learning, influence, understanding. We all understand that in 3 words, but to truly appreciate the application of this formula, now that's where such a case study like this literally open our eyes and say, oh my God, this is how I need to be noticing it. Will that make any difference? Yes. The next time when you go to a coaching conversation, your mind will now have a reference point. Oh, this is how my clients is thinking. Look rather similar to one of these examples that I've been through in the practical lab. Great. I think from that practical lab, I learned that I need to slow down. You don't have to talk to yourself. Your mind naturally will inform you. Okay, slowing down is a way forward for this case like that. Got it? So these are called applied knowledge, which is very powerful and very difficult to transfer. because it requires real-time interaction like this to transfer the wisdom down. So for you to acquire applied knowledge, it's not the same like in the classroom where we teach you, okay, ask these questions, then look out for this. These are not applied knowledge. These are just knowledge. Now, if you only have knowledge, your execution will be relatively predictable and rigid. And you know that the coaching conversation is a very dynamic conversation where the way the mind thinks really is not within your control. Agreed? So you need applied knowledge in order to be masterful, not just knowledge. So today, yay, you guys have paid the price to gain 1 inch higher than before. Good. So as we continue on, on a weekly basis, 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch, how many inch will you grow by the end of the year? I don't know. If I'm a student and I know my teacher is doing such a case like this, trust me, I will be there even at 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay, because such learning is so valuable and precious if you know what is being offered to you. Got it? Great. So stay tuned. There is no lack of live coaching demonstration at CMA. Okay, you can look at our webinar almost every week. There is how many? Every week, how many? 2. In a month, how many? 8. In a year, how many? Not 12 times 8, because there's few months that we are taking a break. Okay, but easily at least 8 times 8, how many? 64. Okay, live coaching sessions. Is that enough? So there's no reason why your conversation cannot be colorful and quality, right? Okay, so in the end of the day, it's the quality of the conversation, and that quality depends on how much the coach can make observations and use the observation to inform the inquiry. Can do? Great. Susan, will you have the honor to close us tonight? Susan, we are waiting for your closing remark to close the session.
I know, right? My internet. Oh, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone, especially our clients, for giving us this rich case study. And of course, gratitude to Ben as always. I think, it just cementing the need to keep on practicing. This whole thing about mastery and things coming out from intuition, because I strongly believe you need that to be able to determine how to engage with your clients. And what I noticed about this was the short circuiting of the client's brain and mind. Because in pausing, it was almost like a shock to her system. And I think that comes from practice, intuition, mastery. And I think that is, at least that's what I'm aspiring to. And I'm hoping that that's what we're all aspiring to with all this learning. So thank you. And we look forward to the next live demonstration.
Oh, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week ahead of you, should we? Okay, so in passing, so let's say goodbye and do look out for the calendar. There's in our webinar, there's a lot of learning session. And by the way, for those who are credential coach, this event is approved by the ICF for CCE unit. You can actually apply them and then get the CCE unit.
I know you are hurting, but better days will come. It's only a season.